All right, everyone, settle down, settle down. Find a seat, ideally one that isn't broken looking at you, back row, and let's dive in. Today, we're tackling the opening act of First Samuel. And let me tell you, if you think your family Thanksgiving is a disaster, you haven't seen anything yet. We're talking about ancient Israel in a state of total spiritual and political freefall. It's messy, it's chaotic, and frankly, it's got better plot twists than anything you'll find on HBO. We're moving from the desperation of a woman's silent prayer to a literal God box causing a national health crisis among the Philistines. It's wild. So, let's start with Hannah. Now, Hannah is one of my favorite figures in the whole Bible because she's basically the patron saint of I've had enough of this. Here's the setup. She's married to a guy named Elkanah. Now, Elkanah is, well, he's a bit of a nice guy who doesn't quite get it. He's got two wives, which, as we know from every historical record ever, is a great recipe for a peaceful household. Not. You've got Peninnah, who has kids and spends her days trolling Hannah, and then you've got Hannah, who is childless. In that culture, that wasn't just a personal sadness, it was a social catastrophe. It was like being the only person at the party without an iPhone, but the party is your entire life and the iPhone is your entire future. Every year they go up to Shiloh to sacrifice, and every year Peninnah turns the bullying up to 11. She's essentially the Regina George of the Iron Age. Hannah is so distraught she's literally crying into her soup, and Elkanah walks in and says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but not by much, "Why are you crying? Am I not better to you than 10 sons?" Pro tip for the students in the room: if your partner is grieving a deep existential loss, do not try to make it about how great you are. It's a bold strategy, Elkanah. Let's see if it pays off. Spoiler, it doesn't. Hannah decides to take matters into her own hands. She goes to the temple and prays. But here's the kicker. She's praying silently. Her lips are moving, but no sound is coming out. Now, why does this matter? Because back then, people usually prayed out loud. Imagine walking into a library today and seeing someone whispering intensely to a shelf. You'd think they'd had one too many espressos, right? Well, Eli the priest sees her and thinks she's drunk. He actually walks up and tells her to sober up. Imagine that. You're at the lowest point of your life, pouring your soul out to the Almighty, and the local clergyman tells you to go sleep it off. Talk about a bad vibe check. But Hannah doesn't crumble. She stands her ground and explains she's pouring out her soul. She makes a deal, a vow. If God gives her a son, she'll give him back to God as a Nazirite. No razor will touch his head, and he'll serve the Lord all his days. Think of it like a full-ride scholarship, but instead of a university, it's the tabernacle. And instead of a diploma, you get a lifetime of prophetic responsibility. Eli realizes he's messed up, gives her a blessing, and suddenly, Hannah is fine. She's no longer sad. Why? Because she's left her bitterness at the Master's feet. That's a key takeaway for the exam, folks. Persistent prayer isn't just about getting what you want, it's about the internal shift that happens when you truly hand over the wheel. And wouldn't you know it, Samuel is born. His name means asked of God. Once he's weaned, which in those days meant he was maybe 3 or 4 years old, Hannah actually follows through. She takes him to Eli and says, "Remember that drunk woman? Yeah, that was me. Here's the kid, he's yours now." Then she breaks into this incredible song. Hannah's Song of Thankfulness. It's a masterpiece. She talks about how God brings down the proud and lifts up the humble. It's the original started from the bottom, now we're here anthem. She realizes that her joy isn't just in the baby, it's in the character of the one who answered her. But while Samuel is growing up and being a literal angel, we've got to talk about the Nepo babies of the sanctuary, Hophni and Phinehas. These are Eli's sons, and they are, to put it scientifically, the absolute worst. They're priests, but they treat the offerings like their personal buffet. They'd show up with a three-pronged hook, jam it into the boiling pot, and whatever came up was theirs. And if you tried to follow the rules and burn the fat first, they'd threaten to take it by force. They were also, and this is in the text, so don't blame me for the spicy details, sleeping with the women who served at the door of the tabernacle. They were essentially running a corrupt steakhouse in a scandal-ridden nightclub out of a holy site. Hello. The dad is basically the personification of passive parenting. He hears about it and says, "Hey guys, stop it, okay? Not cool," and they just ignore him. It's like telling a wildfire to please consider being a candle. Because of this, a man of God shows up and tells Eli that his family is done. The priesthood is moving elsewhere. Both his sons will die on the same day. It's heavy stuff, but it sets the stage for the transition of power. Now, let's talk about the moment Samuel gets his call. This is such a classic scene. Samuel is sleeping in the temple, right near the ark, by the way, which is a bold choice for a kid. And he hears a voice calling his name. He thinks it's Eli. He runs to Eli. "You called?" Eli says, "Nope. Go back to bed." This happens 3 times. 3. It's like that annoying friend who keeps butt dialing you at 2 a.m. Finally, Eli realizes, wait a minute. It's not me. It's the big guy. He tells Samuel, next time you hear it, say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." God speaks, and the message isn't a "congratulations, you're the new prophet" card. It's a confirmation that Eli's house is toast. Samuel has to wake up the next morning and tell his boss, who is basically his foster dad, that his family is doomed. Talk about an awkward Monday morning meeting. But Samuel tells him everything, and Eli, to his credit, just says, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." It's a sad, quiet end for a man who just couldn't lead his own house. Samuel grows up, and he becomes the real deal. The text says none of his words fell to the ground. He's the first prophet in a long time where people actually stopped and listened. He becomes a judge, a prophet, a leader. But Israel is still in trouble because the Philistines are knocking on the door. And here is where the Israelites make a massive, massive tactical error. They go out to battle and get thrashed. 4,000 men dead. So the elders have a brainstorming session and decide, hey, why don't we bring the Ark of the Covenant into the battle? It'll be like a lucky rabbit's foot, but, gold and divine. They treat the ark like a magical weapon in a video game rather than the footstool of a holy god. They bring it into the camp, and the Israelites let out a shout so loud the ground shakes. The Philistines hear it and freak out. They've heard the stories about what this god did to Egypt. They're terrified. They say, "Who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty gods?" They think it's over. But then they have a Braveheart moment. They tell each other, "Be strong, quit yourselves like men, or you'll be servants to the Hebrews." And they fight. And they don't just win, they destroy Israel. 30,000 Israelites die. Hophni and Phinehas, dead. The ark, captured. A messenger runs back to Shiloh to tell Eli. Eli is 98 years old, blind, and sitting on a chair by the gate, waiting for news. The messenger says, "The army fled, your sons are dead, and the ark is gone." When Eli hears about the ark, he literally falls backward off his chair, breaks his neck, and dies. He judged Israel for 40 years, and that's how it ends. Meanwhile, Phinehas's wife goes into labor from the shock. She gives birth and, with her dying breath, names the kid Ichabod, which means the glory has departed from Israel. It's the ultimate mic drop of tragedy. Now, you'd think the Philistines are having a party, right? They've got the ultimate trophy. They take the ark to Ashdod and put it in the temple of their god Dagon. They're probably thinking, our God beat their God. Vibe check, passed. They come back the next morning, and Dagon is face down on the floor in front of the ark. They're like, "Oops, must have been a small earthquake." They set him back up. Next morning, Dagon is on his face again, but this time his head and hands are chopped off on the threshold. It's like a scene from a horror movie. God is basically saying, "I'm not a trophy, and I don't share my room." But it gets weirder. Suddenly the people of Ashdod start getting, well, the King James Version calls them emerods. Modern scholars think this refers to tumors or, quite possibly, very painful hemorrhoids. And there's a plague of mice or rats, too. So the Philistines are dealing with a public health crisis and a rodent infestation. They decide, okay, the ark has to go. They send it to Gath. Gath gets the tumors. They send it to Ekron. Ekron says, "No way, you're trying to kill us." The Philistine lords have a meeting. They decide to return the ark, but they want to make sure it's actually God doing this, and not just a weird coincidence. They build a new cart, get 2 cows that have just had calves, and tie them to the cart. Now, if you know anything about cows, you know that a mother cow is not going to leave her calf unless there's a supernatural force pulling her away. They put the ark on the cart, along with some guilt offerings, 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice. Yes, they made gold models of their medical problems. I wish I was making this up, but it's in the text. They let the cows go, and the cows go straight toward Israelite territory, lowing as they go, never turning left or right. It's a literal GPS guided divine delivery service. The ark arrives in Beth Shemesh, and the people are thrilled. But then, and stay with me, because this is a harsh lesson, some of them decide to look inside the ark. Big mistake. Huge. God strikes down a large number of them. The lesson? You can't treat the holy like it's a museum exhibit. You have to respect the boundaries. The ark eventually ends up at the house of Abinadab in Kiryat Jearim, and it stays there for 20 years. During this time, the people are mourning. They realize things are not right. And this is where Samuel steps back into the spotlight. He's the adult in the room now. He tells the whole nation, if you want God back, you've got to get rid of the idols. Dump the Baalim and the Ashtaroth. Commit your hearts to the Lord. They have a huge gathering at Mizpeh. They're fasting, they're repenting, they're pouring out water as a symbol of their grief. And the Philistines hear about this massive gathering and think, hey, a target-rich environment, let's go finish them off. The Israelites are terrified. They beg Samuel, don't stop crying out to God for us. Samuel offers a sacrifice, and while he's doing it, the Philistines attack. But this time, it's different. The text says God thundered with a great thunder. I imagine this wasn't just a loud noise. It was the kind of thunder that you feel in your marrow. The Philistines are completely disoriented, and the Israelites, who were just crying a minute ago, suddenly find their courage and chase them down. Samuel takes a big stone and sets it up between Mizpeh and Shen. He calls it Ebenezer, which means stone of help. He says, thus far the Lord has helped us. It's a monument to the fact that they didn't win because of their military might or their lucky charm arc. They won because they repented, and Samuel prayed. In fact, the Philistines didn't bother them again as long as Samuel was in charge. So, what have we learned from this 7-chapter roller coaster? First, never underestimate the power of a silent prayer. Hannah's persistence changed the course of history because she was willing to pour her soul out when everyone else was just going through the motions. Second, Nepo babies beware. Privilege doesn't protect you from the consequences of corruption. Eli's sons thought they were untouchable because of their family name, but they ended up as a footnote in a tragedy. Third, God is not a good luck charm. You can't box him up and use him to win your battles if your heart isn't right. The Philistines learned that the hard way, and so did the Israelites. And finally, the Ebenezer principle. Sometimes you need to stop and set a stone. You need to acknowledge how far you've come and who got you there. That's the lecture for today, folks. Read ahead for next week. We're getting into the We Want a King phase, which is basically the ancient version of Be Careful What You Wish For. Don't forget to return your library books, and for the love of all that is holy, if you see a gold box in the woods, do not look inside. Class dismissed. Welcome, everyone. Please find a seat, put the phones away, unless you're using them to look at the primary sources, in which case, carry on. Today, we're diving into one of the greatest political dramas ever written. Forget House of Cards, forget Succession. We're talking about the messy, violent, deeply human transition of Israel from a loose confederation of tribes into a full-blown monarchy. We're talking about 1 Samuel chapters 8 through 18. It's a story about be careful what you wish for. It's about a guy who went looking for his dad's lost donkeys and ended up with a crown he didn't know how to wear. It's about a giant, a sling, and a harpist who was better at PR than the sitting president. Now let's set the scene. Imagine you're living in ancient Israel. For years, you've had judges, basically charismatic military leaders who show up when things get hairy, fix the problem, and then go back to their farms. But the people are restless. They look at the neighbors, the Moabites, the Edomites, the Philistines, and they see these shiny kings in chariots. They've got king in vet. So they go to Samuel, the last of the big deal judges and prophets, and they say, give us a king. We want to be like everyone else. Now Samuel is old, and frankly, he's a bit grumpy. He takes it personally. But God tells him, look, Sam, it's not you they're rejecting, it's me. But do me a favor, give them a warning label first. And this is chapter 8. Samuel gives them this terrifying speech that's basically the ancient version of a terms and conditions agreement that nobody reads. He says, you want a king? Fine. He's going to draft your sons for his cavalry. He's going to make your daughters into perfumers and bakers. He's going to take 1/10 of your grain and your vintage, He's going to take your best fields and give them to his buddies. You're going to be his servants. And when you finally realize this was a terrible idea, God isn't going to pick up the phone. And the people, they do exactly what we do when we want a new iPhone. They click agree without reading. They say, nay, but we will have a king over us. Enter Saul. Chapter 9. If you were casting a king for a movie, you'd pick Saul. The text says he was a choice young man and a goodly, and that he stood head and shoulders above everyone else. He's tall, he's handsome, he's basically a walking recruitment poster. But here's the irony. We meet him while he's failing at a very basic task. He's looking for his father's lost donkeys. He can't find them. He's about to give up when his servant suggests they go see the seer, that's Samuel. God pulls Samuel aside and says, "See that tall guy? That's the one." Samuel meets Saul, gives him the guest of honor seat at a banquet, and then, in chapter 10, he anoints him with oil. It's a private ceremony. Saul's probably thinking, I just wanted my donkeys back, and now I'm the leader of a nation? It's a lot to process. Samuel tells him he'll meet a group of prophets and start prophesying himself, which actually happens. People are so confused they start a proverb. Is Saul also among the prophets? It's like seeing the captain of the football team suddenly lead the drama club's improv night. But then comes the public reveal at Mizpeh. Samuel calls all the tribes together to pick the king by lot. It's a process of elimination. Tribe of Benjamin? Check. Family of Matri? Check. Saul, son of Kish? Check. But when they go to find him, he's gone. Where is he? Stay with me, because this is the first red flag. He's hiding in the luggage. The future king of Israel is literally cowering behind the suitcases. It's funny, but it's also a sign. He's got the look, but does he have the heart? Saul finally gets his main character moment in chapter 11. This guy, Nahash the Ammonite. Lovely fellow. Threatens the town of Jabesh Gilead. He says he'll make a treaty with them only if he can poke out everyone's right eye. You can't make this stuff up. Saul hears about it, gets a surge of divine spirit, hacks up a yoke of oxen. Pro tip, don't do this at home. And sends the pieces around Israel as a join the army or your cows are next flyer. It works. They crush the Ammonites, and suddenly, the hide in the luggage guy is a hero. The kingdom is confirmed at Gilgal. Everyone is happy. Except Samuel. Chapter 12 is Samuel's I told you so retirement speech. He reminds them of all the times God saved them without a king. Then, just to prove he's still got the direct line to upstairs, he calls for a thunderstorm during the wheat harvest, which is basically like calling for a blizzard in July. The people are terrified. They realize, oh, right, we maybe shouldn't have insulted God by asking for a human boss. Samuel tells them, look, just obey God and you'll be fine. But if you do wickedly, you're toast. You and your king. Now we get into the meat of Saul's reign, and folks, it's a downhill slide. Chapter 13. The Philistines are back, and they are terrifying. They've got 30,000 chariots and people, as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. Saul is waiting for Samuel to come and offer a sacrifice before the battle. He waits 7 days. His soldiers are deserting. He's stressed. So, he decides to play priest. He offers the burnt offering himself. Just as he finishes, who walks in? Samuel. And he is livid. Saul tries to explain. The people were scattering. You were late. I forced myself. I love that phrase, I forced myself. It's the universal excuse for doing something you know you shouldn't. Samuel tells him right then and there, your kingdom will not continue. God has sought out a man after his own heart. This is where we see the contrast between Saul and his son Jonathan. Chapter 14 is basically a Jonathan highlight reel. While Saul is sitting under a pomegranate tree, Jonathan and his armor-bearer decide to go climb a cliff and pick a fight with a Philistine garrison. Just the two of them. Jonathan says, "It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few." That's the kind of faith Saul is missing. Jonathan starts a riot in the Philistine camp, and it turns into a total rout. But Saul has to ruin it. He makes this ridiculous, tough guy oath, "Cursed be the man that eateth any food until evening, that I may be avenged on mine enemies." It's a classic move by an insecure leader. He wants to look super spiritual and disciplined, but all he does is make his army hungry and exhausted. Jonathan, who didn't hear the command, finds some honey in the woods and eats it. Suddenly he's refreshed and ready to fight more. When the army finds out, they're basically like, "Your dad is making things difficult for us, man." Saul eventually finds out and is ready to kill his own son to keep his his oath, intact. God do so and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. But the people step in, they're like, "Absolutely not. Jonathan just won the war for us." So Saul backs down, but the damage is done. He's losing his grip. Then comes chapter 15. The point of no return. Samuel gives Saul a clear mission. Go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have. It sounds harsh to our modern ears, but in the context of the story, it's a test of total obedience. Saul goes, he wins, but he decides to keep the good stuff, the best sheep, the best oxen, and he spares Agag, the king. Samuel shows up the next morning. Saul greets him with a big smile. "I have performed the commandment of the Lord." And Samuel gives the most savage reply in the Bible. "What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in mine ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? It's like coming home and telling your parents you cleaned your room while they can literally see the pile of laundry behind you." Saul tries to blame the people. The people spared the best for a sacrifice. Samuel isn't having it. He delivers the famous line, "To obey is better than sacrifice." He tells Saul that because he rejected the word of the Lord, God has rejected him from being king. Saul tries to grab Samuel's robe as he turns to leave, and the robe tears. Samuel says, "The Lord hath rent the kingdom of Israel from thee this day, and hath given it to a neighbor of thine, that is better than thou." Saul is devastated, but he's mostly worried about his image. "Honor me now, I pray thee, before the elders of my people." He cares more about the optics than the actual relationship with God. Samuel kills Agag himself, goes home, and never sees Saul again. It's a tragic, lonely end for Israel's first king, and he's still technically on the throne. Now, chapter 16. God tells Samuel to stop mourning for Saul and go to Bethlehem. He's found a new king among the sons of Jesse. Samuel is scared. If Saul hear it, he will kill me. So he goes under the cover of a sacrifice. Jesse brings out his sons. First up is Eliab. He's tall, he's handsome. Samuel thinks, this must be him, Saul 2.0. But God says, look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Jesse parades 7 sons past Samuel. None of them are the one. Samuel says, "Are here all thy children?" Jesse's like, "Oh, well, there's the youngest, but he's out with the sheep." They bring in David. He's ruddy and has a beautiful countenance. He's a kid. But God says, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." The Spirit of God rushes on to David and, simultaneously, departs from Saul. In its place, an evil spirit from the Lord troubles Saul. Now, don't get hung up on the evil spirit part. Think of it as a profound divine depression or a haunting sense of guilt and paranoia. Saul's servants suggest music therapy. And who is the best harpist in the land? You guessed it, David. So David enters Saul's service. It's incredibly dramatic. David is the king in waiting, playing music to soothe the man he's destined to replace. Saul loves him. He makes David his armor bearer. He has no idea he's invited his replacement into his living room. And then, chapter 17. The big one. The Philistines and Israelites are lined up on 2 hills with a valley between them. Out walks Goliath of Gath. He's nearly 10 feet tall. He's wearing over 100 pounds of bronze armor. His spearhead alone weighs 15 pounds. He's a human tank. For 40 days he comes out and mocks Israel, saying, "Send me a man to fight. If he wins, we're your servants. If I win, you're ours." The Israelite army is terrified. Saul is terrified. Remember, Saul is the tall guy. He's supposed to be the one out there. But he's in his tent. David shows up to bring lunch to his older brothers. He hears Goliath and he's indignant. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? His brother Eliab tries to shut him up. Classic older brother move. But David keeps talking. Word gets to Saul. David tells Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine." Saul looks at this teenager and says, "You're just a kid. He's been a warrior since he was your age." David's response is legendary. He says, "I used to kill lions and bears when they attacked my sheep. This Philistine will be just like one of them." Saul tries to put his own armor on David. It's a great image, the big king's armor clanking around on this small kid. David can't even walk in it. "I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them." He takes it off. He picks up 5 smooth stones from a brook, grabs his sling, and walks out into the valley. Goliath is insulted. "Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves?" He curses David by his gods. David gives the best pre-game speech in history. "Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand." David doesn't wait. He runs toward the giant. He slings 1 stone. It hits Goliath right in the forehead, the one spot not covered by bronze. The giant falls. David has no sword, so he takes Goliath's own sword and finishes the job. The Philistines flee, the Israelites cheer, and David becomes a national hero overnight. But, as we see in chapter 18, fame is a double-edged sword. David becomes best friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. They have this soul knit to soul bond. Jonathan even gives David his own robe and weapons, essentially handing over his right to the throne. But Saul? Saul is listening to the radio. The women are singing a new hit song. Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul does the math. They've given David 10,000s, and me only thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? From that day on, Saul is eyeing David with pure jealousy. The next day, while David is playing the harp for him, Saul literally tries to pin David to the wall with a javelin. Twice. David dodges both times. Saul realizes God is with David, and he's terrified of him. He tries to get David killed by sending him on dangerous military missions, but David just keeps winning. He's behaved himself wisely in all his ways. Finally, Saul tries to snare him with marriage. He offers his daughter Michal, but the dowry is, wait for it, 100 Philistine foreskins. He thinks David will surely die trying to get them. David comes back with 200. By the end of chapter 18, Saul is David's permanent enemy. He's realized that the kid with the harp is the man Samuel warned him about. The tragedy is complete. Saul has the title, but David has the favor. Saul has the palace, but David has the hearts of the people, and the hearts of Saul's own children. So, what's the takeaway from this wild ride through the rise of the monarchy? It's a study in character. Saul had the height, the looks, and the opportunity, but he lacked the internal foundation. He was driven by fear, fear of the people, fear of the enemy, and eventually fear of his own successor. David, for all his later faults, started with a heart that was oriented towards something bigger than himself. The lesson here? Be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. And if you aren't ready for it, the luggage you're hiding behind won't save you. All right, that's all for today. Read ahead into the next few chapters. Things get even crazier when David goes on the run. And for the love of everything, if you see any giant Philistines on your way to lunch, just keep walking. See you next time. All right, everyone, settle down. Put the phones away. Unless you're live tweeting how much you love this class, in which case, carry on. Today we're diving into the absolute chaos that is 1 Samuel, chapters 19 through 31. This isn't just history. It's a prestige TV drama that HBO would kill for. We've got a king losing his mind, a fugitive hero living in caves, a secret bromance, a high-stakes seance, and enough betrayal to make a Shakespearean tragedy look like a Pixar movie. Now, imagine for a second that you're David. You've killed the giant. You're the nation's sweetheart, and the king's daughter is your wife. Life's good, right? Wrong. Because your father-in-law, King Saul, is currently looking at you the way a cat looks at a laser pointer, with intense, murderous focus. We're starting in chapter 19, where the Saul-David relationship officially moves from its complicated to, he's literally throwing spears at me while I play the harp. It's the ultimate toxic workplace environment. David has to bail. His wife Michal actually helps him escape through a window and puts a household idol in his bed with a wig made of goat hair to trick Saul's assassins. It's the original Ferris Bueller's Day Off move, and it works. David flees to Samuel at Ramah, and when Saul sends 3 groups of thugs to catch him, they all end up caught in a prophetic frenzy. Even Saul shows up, strips off his clothes, and lies naked all night prophesying. I mean, stay with me here. This is the leader of the country. It's essentially a divine system reboot to keep David safe. But David knows he can't stay. He meets up with Jonathan, Saul's son, and David's best friend. and honestly, the realest guy in the Bible. Chapter 20 is all about their covenant. They've got this elaborate code involving arrows to determine if Saul is still trying to kill David. Spoiler alert, he is. Saul gets so mad at Jonathan for defending David that he actually tries to spear his own son. That's when you know the family Thanksgiving is going to be awkward. David and Jonathan have this tearful goodbye in a field, and David officially becomes a man on the run. Now, here's where David starts making some questionable choices. He's hungry, he's scared, and he goes to Nob in chapter 21. He tells the priest, Ahimelech, that he's on a secret mission for the king. Total lie. He eats the holy bread, the showbread, which was strictly for priests. It's like raiding the Vatican's private snack bar. He even takes Goliath's sword, which was being kept there like a trophy. Then, in a moment of sheer what was he thinking, he flees to Gath. That's Goliath's hometown. It's like a Red Sox player trying to hide out in a Yankees fan club wearing his jersey. The people recognize him immediately. To survive, David has to change his behavior, which is a polite way of saying he feigned madness. He's scrabbling at the gates and letting spit run down his beard. King Achish of Gath basically says, "Do I not have enough crazy people in my life? Get this guy out of here." David escapes, but he's learned a valuable lesson. Being a hero is hard, but being a madman is a great camouflage. By chapter 22, David's living in the cave of Adullam, and he's not alone. He's joined by about 400 guys who are in distress, in debt, and discontented. Think of it like the Guardians of the Galaxy, but with more bitterness and less 70s pop music. While David is building his misfit army, things get dark back at Nob. Remember Doeg the Edomite? He was watching David at the priest's house. He tells Saul, and Saul, in a fit of absolute tyranny, orders the massacre of the entire priestly family. His own guards won't do it. They've still got some moral compass left. But Doeg's a corporate climber with no soul. He kills 85 priests and the entire town of Nob. Only one guy, Abiathar, escapes and finds David. David carries that guilt for the rest of his life. He knows his lie caused that bloodbath. Chapter 23 and 24 are like a high-stakes game of hide-and-seek in the desert. David saves the town of Keilah from Philistines, but then he finds out the people of Keilah are ready to hand him over to Saul the second he shows up. Talk about no gratitude. David flees to the wilderness of Ziph. Saul is hunting him every day, but God keeps David just out of reach. There's this incredible moment in the En-Gedi wilderness where Saul goes into a cave to cover his feet, which is the biblical way of saying he needed a bathroom break. David and his men are hiding in the back of the very same cave. Imagine the tension. David's men are whispering, "This is it. Kill him. God delivered him to you." But David just creeps up and cuts off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterward, he feels guilty even for that. He follows Saul out and says, "Look, I could have killed you, but I won't touch the Lord's anointed." Saul has a moment of clarity, weeps, calls David more righteous than I, and goes home. But we all know Saul's clarity has the shelf life of an open avocado. And then, chapter 25, Samuel dies, the end of an era. David is still in the wilderness, and he runs into this guy named Nabal. His name literally means fool, so you know this isn't going to end well. David's men had been protecting Nabal's shepherds, and when David asks for a little food in return, Nabal basically says, "David who? Jesse's son? Never heard of him." David loses his cool. He's ready to wipe out Nabal's entire household. Enter Abigail, Nabal's wife. She is the smartest person in this entire book. She doesn't wait for her husband. She packs up a massive feast, intercepts David, and gives this brilliant diplomatic speech that keeps him from committing a massacre. She essentially tells him, "Don't ruin your future kingship with a revenge plot over some cheap bread." David listens. Nabal, meanwhile, gets drunk, finds out what happened the next morning, and his heart died within him. He probably had a stroke, and he dies 10 days later. David marries Abigail, and also, Ahinoam. His first wife, Michal, Saul gave her away to another guy. It's a mess, folks. Total mess. But wait, it gets weirder. In chapter 26, Saul is back at it again, hunting David in the wilderness of Ziph. It's like a rerun of the Engedi incident. David and his nephew Abishai sneak into Saul's camp at night. Everyone is in a deep sleep from the Lord. Abishai wants to pin Saul to the ground with a spear, but David says no. Instead, he steals Saul's spear and his water jar. They go to the top of a hill, and David starts yelling at Abner, Saul's general, like, "Hey Abner, great job guarding the king. By the way, where's his spear?" It's a masterclass in trolling. Saul realizes again that David spared him, but David knows he can't trust Saul's word. So, David does something radical in chapter 27. He defects. He goes back to Achish of Gath, the same guy he drooled for earlier, and says, "Let me work for you." Achish gives him the town of Ziklag. For 16 months, David plays double agent. He raids the enemies of Israel, but tells Achish he's raiding Judah. He's essentially the 10th century BC version of a sleeper cell. Achish is so convinced that he thinks David is stink in the nostrils of Israel and will serve him forever. Now we're getting to the climax. The Philistines are gearing up for a massive war against Israel. Saul is terrified. He tries to ask God for advice, but God is ghosting him. No dreams, no prophets, nothing. So, in chapter 28, Saul does the unthinkable. He goes to a medium, the witch of Endor. This is like a sitting president going to a psychic in a basement because his cabinet won't talk to him. He asks her to bring up Samuel. And, this is the crazy part, it actually works. Samuel's ghost appears, and he is not happy to be woken up. He tells Saul, "Why are you asking me? God's your enemy now. Tomorrow you and your sons will be with me." Saul collapses in terror. It's the ultimate "I told you so" from beyond the grave. Meanwhile, David is in a tight spot in chapter 29. He's supposed to march with the Philistines against Israel. But the other Philistine lords aren't as naive as Achish. They say, "No way. This guy will turn on us in the middle of the battle." So they send David back to Ziklag. When David gets there in chapter 30, he finds Ziklag burned to the ground, and all the women and children taken by the Amalekites. His own men are talking about stoning him. David is at his absolute lowest. But the text says he encouraged himself in the Lord. He chases the Amalekites down, rescues everyone, and recovers all the loot. Then he shows his leadership by insisting that the men who stayed behind to guard the supplies get an equal share of the spoil. He's building the legal framework for a kingdom while he's still a fugitive. Finally, chapter 31. The battle at Mount Gilboa. It's a disaster for Israel. Saul's sons, including Jonathan, rest in peace, hero, are killed. Saul is wounded by archers, and rather than being captured, he falls on his own sword. The Philistines find his body, cut off his head, and hang his corpse on the wall of Beth-shan. It's a grisly end for the first king of Israel. But the story ends with a spark of hope. The men of Jabesh Gilead, whom Saul had saved way back at the beginning of his reign, pull a midnight heist to rescue the bodies and give them a proper burial. Loyalty survives even in the wreckage of a failed monarchy. So, what's the takeaway here? If we look at the trajectory of these chapters, we see David being forged in the fire of exile. He's not perfect. He lies. He fakes madness. He works for the enemy. But he keeps his heart after God by refusing to take shortcuts to the throne. Saul, on the other hand, shows us the anatomy of a breakdown. He's a man who had everything and lost it because he became more obsessed with his legacy than his integrity. The moral: success is easy. It's the wilderness that tells you who you really are. And if you're ever hiding in a cave and your enemy walks in for a bathroom break, maybe just cut the robe and leave the spear alone. It makes for a much better story later. Class dismissed. Don't forget, the midterm is coming up, and yes, the Witch of Endor is on it. See you next time.